Hey, out there in podcast land, welcome to the latest episode of The Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane, as always. Glad to be with you on a Friday evening. This is episode 70, taping here on December the 16th, 2022, 9 days until Christmas. Hope you have got all your shopping done, all your plans laid out for who you're going to be with, what you're going to do on the big day. 2 more episodes, this one and the 23rd of The Fortress, before we hit Christmas. No Christmas music this week, but I think next Friday's episode we might have to delve into a rock and roll Christmas of sorts. But for now, here on the 16th, you get News of the World, our tribute to Queen and Freddie Mercury, as always. Each and every week, the latest rock and roll headlines. First and foremost, interesting news coming out of the Eagles camp. The Eagles have remastered and released officially, no bootlegs here, these 8 official videos come out of the Eagles camp on YouTube now for the first time ever, remastered, clean and clear. Great videos. I have sampled them. Especially the one I had to watch was the Joe Walsh led In the City, one of my favorite Eagles songs ever. And the video is, again, crystal clear, beautiful quality. Check out In the City. Of course, there are other videos here. A 1977 live version of Hotel California, which I'm sure is fantastic, but I've heard the damn song so many times, I just don't need to see the video. But I trust in the fact these guys are so meticulous and so careful about their image and their property that I've got to believe it's fantastic video. Also, you've got the Timothy B. Schmidt led I Can't Tell You Why. Some of the newer songs that they've put out over the last 20, 30 years since they got back together. So go to YouTube, put in the Eagles, and check out these 8 remastered videos now available officially for the first time on YouTube. Lots of cool stuff, kids. Check it out. And I was thinking about it. A great debate topic when you're with your in-laws, your friends, your family for Christmas. If they're rock and rollers like you, greatest American rock bands of all time. American is the key. You can't throw the Beatles in there. You can't throw the Who in there. You can't throw the Stones in there. So what are the greatest American rock bands of all time? Just in random order. You know who I'm going with number 1. But you've got Aerosmith, you've got the Eagles, you've got CCR, you've got Van Halen. Those 4 bands have got to be in the top 10, if not the top 5. Again, that's what we do here, giving you a public service, an icebreaker for those awkward moments before your in-laws get too liquored up and start fighting about politics. Tour news. Of course, it seems like each and every week we have tour news. I love the name of this tour coming in 2023 to an outdoor venue or an arena near you. The Sharp Dressed Simple Man Tour. Yes, that is ZZ Top and Leonard Skinner touring together. Like Kiss, Leonard Skinner is on the farewell tour that never ends. But that's okay. As long as they can still bring it, we're all good with it. And of course, ZZ Top is almost the opposite in terms of they lost Dusty Hill. They brought in their guitar tech to take over on bass. Billy Gibbons and Frank Beard say, screw it, we're going to keep plowing forward, new music coming. ZZ Top will continue on. So this is awesome. July the 21st through September the 17th. Again, check them out at a venue near you. Support from Uncle Kracker. In health news, because of course we always talk about the fact that a lot of our aging rockers that we follow and idolize and worship are falling ill, have health issues, are dying. This one's a little scary because you're talking about a band that's a little bit younger. Rage Against the Machine, again, you guys know I don't like Rage, but Tim Comerford, their bass player, of course, also played bass in a band I loved, Audioslave, which we all know was Rage Against the Machine with a better singer, otherwise known as the great late Chris Cornell. But Tim Comerford, who has always been in fantastic shape. If you've ever seen videos of Rage back in the day or even Audioslave, Tim Comerford was in great shape, has always kept himself physically fit. He has prostate cancer. He had his prostate removed, according to a recent report. So, of course, another reason why this last Rage Against the Machine comeback tour ground to a halt much quicker than it was supposed to. Now, we talked here about how Zach De La Rocha tore up his Achilles early on in the tour, and now with Comerford having to deal with the treatment repercussions of prostate cancer and that draining him physically, he just couldn't make it all the way through the tour either. So, again, you got to separate. You got to separate your personal taste from being a decent human being. So, of course, despite the fact that I do not like Rage Against the Machine, I hope Tim Comerford gets through this prostate cancer situation okay. And at some point in time, I hope they all get healthy and they can go back out on the road so I can not go see them. But I know friends of mine who want to, who love them. So for them, I hope only for the best. Quiet Riot. Of course, another band where the founding members, the legendary lineup. We talked recently about Journey, and we all know that Journey went through a lot of changes, but we always talk about the classic era lineup. That being Ross Valerie and Steve Smith, Steve Perry, Jonathan Cain, Neil Schon, and you can throw Greg Rowley in there as well. Same thing can be said for Quiet Riot. They have had lineup shifts and changes throughout the years. But of course, we lost lead singer Kevin DuBrow way too early. And then, of course, within the last couple years, we lost Frankie Banali. drummer for Quiet Riot. It was good to see Rudy Sarzo, former bass player for Quiet Riot, put this together. 2008 album Rehab, which I'll admit, I don't think I've ever listened to. I was way out on Quiet Riot by that point in time. And this is right around the time that Kevin DuBrow passed away. So Rehab has been remastered. It has been re-released. It is for the first time ever available on your favorite streaming service. But possibly the biggest news of all of this is that there is a brand new song that they have remastered, put together, pieced together. We've talked recently about The Doors and Paris Blues and how they were able to put that back together and give us a new Doors song. Well, now we've got a new Quiet Riot song called I Can't Hold On. And this song will be included on this new remastered version of Rehab. So check that out. I have a feeling, a very strong feeling, a very strong inclination that I Can't Hold On might be reviewed here on the Fortress of Rock in the next few weeks. But who am I to presume? I'm just the host. And then finally, wrapping up news of the world, a very, very intriguing story coming out of ultimateclassicrock.com. Of course, one of our main sources for a lot of these stories. I'm old school. You guys know that. I've lived through the first phase of albums, cassette tapes, 8-track tapes, FM radio, and AM radio. Ultimate Classic Rock recently posted a story talking about the fact that AM radio may be doomed because of electric cars. Now, I'm no scientist. God knows I'm barely a rock and roll expert, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it. You got to figure all the extra electricity, the extra electric current that's running through an EV. That would mess with reception, frequency when it comes to bringing in AM and FM radio. But now they're saying in this article that it will especially hinder your reception of AM radio. And anybody who, to this day, tries to turn on AM radio knows it is very spotty, low quality reception as it is right now. It was like that when I was a kid, when I would listen to WLS out of Chicago with Larry Lujak and John Records Landecker. But now they're saying car manufacturers will probably stop even putting AM radio capability into their cars in the future when it comes to EV cars and trucks. So basically, you're going to get nothing but FM. How long is that going to last? How long is it until they pull that out? They've already pulled CD players out. See, I don't like this. I've told you guys I don't like this. I was lucky enough with my last new car to get the last year for my particular make and model that they had CD players in. It was one of those end of model year sales. They had the 2018s in, but I bought the 2017 because I wanted the CD player. But we're just going to get to the point, I guess, where you're either going to have Sirius XM, which I don't like because you have to pay for it, which is bullcrap. If you're going to force us to have fewer and fewer options, don't force us to pay extra for those fewer options. Or plug your phone in, which could be, in my opinion, even worse. More distracted driving. I don't want to mess around with my phone in terms of I put a playlist in and I am stuck with that playlist because unless I want to be distracted, mess around with controls on my steering wheel, or God forbid, reach over and mess with my phone, I'm stuck with what I initially chose. If I have a CD, I put the CD in that I want. And what I can do is if I don't like that CD, when I get to a stopping point, I pop it out, throw another one in, go up to my visor. You people, old school people like me, know what I'm talking about. You go up to your visor, you quickly pull out another CD and slam that in. A lot quicker, a lot more efficient, a lot safer than messing around with your phone. But again, in the idiotic world we live in now, I'm an anachronism. I'm an old fogey. Guess what? I don't care. I'll take my way or the highway when it comes to this. I've got a CD player in a car that has less than 15,000 miles in it. I will run that car into the ground, and that means I will always have a CD player and all the other options, AM, FM, Sirius XM, or even plugging my phone in if I so choose. We want more options, not less. So if these electric vehicles are dooming AM radio, the hell with the electric vehicles. And I still don't believe 100% they're better for the environment because of all of the mining and all of the metals and all the waste that goes into all the batteries that are involved in making one of these run. But that's off topic. That's not rock and roll. So, with that, I will close out News of the World. Thanks for hanging out with me, segment 1 here on December the 16th. Segment 2 coming up in just a moment after a quick promo. Our review of Ugly Kid Joe's brand new album, Rad Wings of Destiny, as well as the brand new Metallica single, Lux Eterna. Stay tuned. The Maestro will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fortress of Rock. December the 16th, 2022, of course. Every Friday night, you will find us all over the place. Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon, and Audible. And of course, don't forget to check out our Facebook page. This weekend's Weekend Rock Project, in tribute to, and I use those words loosely, the awful, pathetic show that's a big hit on Netflix about Harry and Meghan, the ostracized royals. So, part one of our two-part Weekend Rock Project on our Facebook page is your best rock songs with king or kings in the title. So check that out. Go to the Facebook page, throw your 2 cents in. Breakdown segment 2, new music, concerts, albums, singles. Your featured album review for this week is the new album from Ugly Kid Joe. Came out a couple months ago. Of course, a play on the classic Judas Priest album, Rad Wings of Destiny. So let us go through Rad Wings of Destiny track by track, 10 songs. First up, song that we have reviewed previously on The Fortress, That Ain't Livin'. That was actually the first release off the album, and it is one of the strongest songs on the album. It has got that nasty, ugly Kid Joe vibe to it. Although later on, we'll talk about more the prototypical Ugly Kid Joe song. But That Ain't Livin' is still a very strong, down and dirty, nasty indictment of what people think is the way to live and what we should all appreciate, what should be the way to live. Not heavy, deep thinking from Ugly Kid Joe, of course. You're not getting that, but still, very good song. Second song, second track on Rad Wings is Not Like the Other. An interesting song, a good song, not a great song, but you can hear in the vocals some old channeling of Bon Scott from AC/DC back in the day. Not saying the song itself necessarily sounds like AC/DC, but you'll hear a couple of those Bon Scott flourishes in the vocals. Again, pretty good song, not great, not bad. Song 3, Everything's Changing, wasn't one of my favorites. And then song 4, Kill the Pain, along the same lines, just not what I was expecting from Ugly Kid Joe. I guess the problem with my perspective with Ugly Kid Joe is that I'm used to the antisocial nastiness of songs like Everything About You and Neighbor. Even with the lead-off track here, That Ain't Livin'. And I'm not criticizing Ugly Kid Joe for trying to do different things. I encourage that. Number one, I think it would be extremely hard for them to put together 10 or 12 songs as creative, but as nasty and antisocial and still as catchy as those songs I previously mentioned. But tracks 2 through 4, Not Like the Other, Everything's Changing, and Kill the Pain are different than what you would expect if you are a casual Ugly Kid Joe fan. Again, not terrible, but none of the three songs really stands out. Now we get to in my opinion, the low point. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of pushback on this, but track 5 is their cover of the Kinks' classic Lola. Now, all I'm going to say about this is cover songs in general. You guys know I rant and rave about cover songs week after week after week because that seems to be a lot of what we're getting now from all these bands, all these artists that we love that are still around. They just want to do cover songs because there's not a lot of money to be made anymore in making original music. But if you're going to do a cover song, you better do something different. You better put your own twist on it. You better bring your band's personality or your own personality into the song. And my problem with Ugly Kid Joe's Lola is that they do not do anything different with the song. There is nothing here different about Lola. I would rather listen to the original. And I think that is your key criticism point for any cover song, is that if you hear a cover song and you say, I'd rather hear the original, then it's a failure. If you go, well, I like this, I like both the original and this version, then they did something different. They twisted it, they turned it, they did something different. They added their own personality, whether it's a solo performer or a band. And unfortunately, here with Lola, I cannot say that Ugly Kid Joe did anything to add to the legacy of Lola. So right now, halfway through the album, I'm very wishy-washy, iffy on it. Luckily, the second half of the album gets a lot better. And it starts with track 6, which I'll tell you right now, even this late in the year, I know this album came out a few months back, so it qualifies for 2022. This song, track 6, Dead Friends Play, might be one of my top 5 songs of the year. It is bare bones, rock and roll, very simple, very catchy drum, guitar. The lyrics are all about the music you and I love. It's basically a tribute to bands, performers, living and dead, who influenced Ugly Kid Joe. Van Halen, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Motorhead, ZZ Top, on and on. But the lyrics are so well done. The chorus is so well constructed. This is a brilliant song. I'm sorry, it is a brilliant tribute song to the bands back in the 70s and the 80s. I love Dead Friends Play. Again, could end up being one of my top songs of the year. Track 7 after that is Up in the City. An interesting, this is where we go back to what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. A departure, a different feel, a different vibe. Up in the City is kind of a funky, druggy type song. Psychedelic maybe a little bit. But it's a really cool song. Now maybe I let the high that I experienced from Dead Friends Play carry on into the next song, but I thought Up in the City was a pretty damn good song. Again, a little bit more out there, psychedelic. It still ends up being a really cool song. Now, the vibe does not carry over into track 8, Drinking and Driving. Again, another very, very iffy proposition here on Rad Wings of Destiny. There are a few songs on this album where Ugly Kid Joe are trying to almost go country-ish. We'll talk about Long Road in a minute, which we've reviewed on the Fortress in the past. Just doesn't seem to fit. Not terrible. But again, you can kind of tell where I'm going with my review of this as we've got 2 songs left. Ugly Kid Joe are a little schizophrenic on this album, where they go all over the map, showing off all of their influences, which is fine, but there's really not a cohesive sound to the album. Some people might say that's fantastic. I think it works both ways, positive and negative. So track 9 is where we get to what I referenced earlier. Stereotypical. Meat and bones. Ugly Kid Joe from back in the day. Failure is track 9. Failure sounds like the bastard offspring of Neighbor. And I mean that in a great way. I mean that in the best possible way. This is where we go, finally. 100% Ugly Kid Joe. The negativity, self-deprecation, ranting against society. So it takes until track 9 and we finally get the old school Ugly Kid Joe. And I'm not indicting the rest of the album. I'm just saying that it was good to hear the old rebellious youth that I connect to the early years of Ugly Kid Joe. And then finally, Long Road closes out the album, track 10. Again, just mentioned, we reviewed that a few months ago here on the Fortress. Long Road has that country music feel to it. Now, the more I listen to it, the more I like it, and I think it's a great closing track for Rad Wings of Destiny. So overall, I have to say I like the album to a point. I'll probably listen to it again, which is kind of the cutoff here on the Fortress for recommending or not recommending an album. If I tell you I've already listened to it 3 or 4 times and then I will still continue on and listen to it again, that's my recommendation. And that's what I'm saying with Ugly Kid Joe's Rad Wings of Destiny. But again, a lot of it has to do with just a few strong songs, especially Dead Friends Play. If you don't want to put yourself through the entire album, even though it's good, I highly recommend at least, if you're a child of the 80s and the 70s like I am, I beg you, I implore you to listen to Ugly Kid Joe's Dead Friends Play. But the whole album is solid. Not going to be top of 2022 on the Maestro's list, but still a lot better than most of the stuff that we got in this year. All right, we've got one song to review this week. We've promised over the last couple weeks we were finally going to get to the first single off of 72 Seasons, the upcoming album from Metallica. First single, of course, as you all know by now, is Lux Eterna. It's good. It's fine. It's Metallica. Feels a little paint by numbers to me. Not trying to insult it. I'll still recommend it, especially for the diehard Metallica fan out there. But it's nothing special. It's nothing out of the ordinary for Metallica. So, as has been my philosophy here since I started this podcast, actually go back even further. I've always thought that when I hear the first single off an album from somebody I really like Metallica, if the first single is so-so, that's fine. The second single, the second release is always key. Because to me, 85% of the time, the second single is the best song on the album. The second song is really the song that's going to lead the charge going into the release of the full album. Now, of course, times have changed. We'll probably get 4 singles from Metallica by the time 72 Seasons actually comes out, because we're looking at April for an album release. So I can't believe that Metallica's not going to release another 3 singles by that time. That being said, I expect better with the second single whenever it comes out, probably January, I would imagine. Lux Eterna is fine. It's solid. Comfort food for all of us who love Metallica, but it's not a classic by any stretch, in my humble opinion. And I'm sure there are Metallica fanatics out there who already want to pummel me into the ground, throw rocks and garbage at me because I don't unequivocally love it. And that's how I would be about a Van Halen fan who didn't like anything and everything Van Halen put out. So I get it. I get fan is short for fanatic. Again, like Lux Eterna. Don't love it, like it. All right, and that's going to do it for Breakdown. Segment 2 is done here. Episode 70. Fortress of Rock. One more promo. One quick promo before you and I get to travel back in time, as we do each and every week on the Fortress. We have got a lot to discuss when it comes to the anniversaries, birthdays, classic moments in rock and roll history. I Want to Go Back is just around the corner. Stay tuned. I will be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, you find your seatbelt, strap yourself in. I will adjust the dials to 1.21 gigawatts as we climb in the rock and roll DeLorean, go back in time. Yes, segment 3 each and every week here on the Fortress of Rock is I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. We go back and look at this day in rock and roll, birthdays, anniversaries of important moments in rock and roll history. Now, of course, as we're traveling back, we've got a little bit of time here, so let me, as always, give credit to the sources that I use to get a lot of the ideas for news of the world, and I Want to Go Back. Of course, ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and for Van Halen news, the Van Halen News Desk. But in the end, the opinions, the rants, the ravings, all mine and mine alone. So it's an amalgam, facts and opinions, what I like, how I feel about music, how I feel about the stories, woven into the actual historical moments. Let's start with a couple birthdays this week, and I Want to Go Back. We'll start off going all the way back to 1946. We're going to go way back and then move forward. December the 16th, of course, the day we're taping this. 1946. 76 years old today. Benny Andersson. Hardcore rock and rollers out there are going, who? What? You guys know I like to bring in a lot of 70s music in that's not necessarily rock and roll, more influential to me as I was growing up. And this is one of those instances. Benny Andersson is one of the 4 members of ABBA. And you can degrade, denigrate, complain about ABBA not being rock and roll. But if you look at their influence on the landscape of music history, and look recently with the 2 movies, the Mamma Mia movies, now with the recent virtual tour or virtual show that they have put on with great success, it would be hard to argue outside of maybe Queen, a band that has had more influence over a longer stretch of time in terms of popularity, movies, shows, sales, whatever yardstick you want to put on it, outside of Queen. Who are you putting out there that beats ABBA? Now we come back a couple years. December the 16th of 1949, the great, awesome, underrated Billy Gibbons. We talked in segment 1 about how ZZ Top is going out on tour with Lynyrd Skynyrd. Of course, Billy Gibbons, the master guitarist for ZZ Top. And I will admit, I undervalued Billy Gibbons for many, many years. I think I've only come to appreciate him more. I always liked him. I always thought he was a master marketer. He always knew how to run ZZ Top in terms of getting them out in the public eye being able to get a feel for what was working at what time in history, whether it's let's do videos on MTV, let's lay low and just go with AOR radio. But I saw him with ZZ about 5 years ago. I'd seen him way, way back when I was in high school. But I think seeing him in his older years and seeing how well he plays guitar, you guys know Eddie Van Halen is it for me. That's the be all end all when it comes to guitars and guitar players. But I gained so much more respect for Billy Gibbons. He must have been about 67, 68 years old when I saw him the last time. He's 73 years old today. And happy birthday to Billy Gibbons. But seeing how he knows how to fit his style of playing and his personality into the song structure better than almost anybody. I would say Mark Knopfler might be better. The late, great Stevie Ray Vaughan. But even Stevie Ray Vaughan was even more of a show-off. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But Eddie Van Halen was too. I think Mark Knopfler and Billy Gibbons kind of know a little bit better than those other guys how to fit their solos and their egos into the structure of the song. Happy birthday to the great Billy Gibbons, and I will be seeing you in 2023 on your tour with Lynyrd Skynyrd. Lots and lots and lots of anniversaries to deal with here. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump all the way forward in our rock and roll DeLorean and then start moving back. Unfortunately, the first 3 anniversaries we have got to deal with all on December the 16th. Not a great day in rock and roll history when it comes to deaths. So we've got 3 in a row here for you, so bear with me. December the 16th, 2007, Dan Fogelberg passed away. Now, I know, again, like ABBA, a lot of you guys out there are going, come on, man, where's the rock and roll? I'm still looking back at the influences from the 70s for me. Dan Fogelberg, yes, he was mellow, yacht rock. But he had some great, great mellow songs. I've still got somewhere in my house among my thousands of CDs his greatest hits. He had some poignant songs, some tearjerkers that actually were moving, that actually were emotional, that I thought worked very well. And compared to some of the crappy hair metal ballads of the 1980s, and you guys know which ones I'm talking about, Open Arms comes to mind. Dan Fogelberg did a much better job of tugging the heartstrings than a lot of the bands that we know and love in the rock realm. Now going back in time to December the 16th, 2001. Tragic. Stuart Adamson, the leader of the band Big Country, was found dead in Hawaii on this day back in 2001. An apparent suicide. Big Country, true test If you really, really know your 80s rock and roll, then you remember Big Country. You remember they had a nice run for about a year and a half, 2 years, where they were very popular on the rock charts and on MTV. Of course, their biggest hit was In a Big Country. Underrated song that I personally love from them off the next album was Where the Rose is Sown. If you've never heard that song before, check it out. Very, very cool. I believe the album was Steel Town. But Stuart Adamson had a history of substance abuse problems, alcohol. Um, and I always have problems with suicides in rock and roll. I can't begin to understand what's going through the heads of people like Stuart Adamson or Chris Cornell or Kurt Cobain, even the people that unintentionally, inadvertently killed themselves because they just went too far with drinking and drugs. John Bonham, of course, Jimi Hendrix, those types. And we're not here to judge. I'm not here to judge. I don't know the pain, the suffering, the mental anguish, the mental trauma, the pressure from record labels, family, and friends that the artist was going through at the time. And we always talk about how noble we are, and we always say there's help out there for you. There's people out there who will help you get through these tough times. But I think sometimes you just feel so isolated and so alone. And yes, that sounds a little bit hypocritical when you're talking about somebody who can play in front of 10, 15, 20,000 fans like a Chris Cornell, and then the next night feel so miserable and lonely that you want to die. There's that old saying, there is a fine line between genius and insanity. And I don't think we're talking about insanity, but I think it's almost there's a fine line between musical genius and musical melancholy. Even with writers, even with actors and actresses, and God knows I am not the biggest fan at all of celebrities in Hollywood, but I think once you're built up and once you find that adoration, platinum album sales and tens of thousands of people attending your concerts, it's got to be a tough dichotomy to live with, to go from that to a hotel room where you're by yourself and you're alone with your thoughts. Now, some of you would probably say, oh, that should be easy to deal with. It's time to come down, relax, get yourself together, watch a movie. I don't think that's the mindset that the creative person has. And I'm not saying they always have to be adored, they always have to be loved, but I think there always has to be something pushing them in a positive way. And if that push turns negative, I think it becomes extreme. And I think that's what we see in these situations. And then, unfortunately, one last negative vibe here. December the 16th of 1997, Nicolette Larson passed away. Now, a lot of you, again, like Dan Fogelberg, are going, what are you talking about? Why are you going back to somebody who's not even rock and roll? Well, Nicolette Larson deserves our attention because, number one, she had one fantastic hit song back in 1978 called Lotta Love. It's ultimately catchy. It's fantastic. And again, another song, another influence for me early on. I was 13 years old when Lotta Love was a top 10 hit in the US. And I liked it. I thought it was a really good song. But again, I loved all the music back then. Now, the one thing, you learn something new every day. Another cliche that I will reinforce all day, every day is if you are not learning something new every day, then you're doing something wrong and you're living a miserable life. So I learned as I researched for today's podcast. Again, Lotta Love, a beautiful, beautiful song from Nicolette Larson. Written by Neil Young, who you guys know I can't stand at all. So what do? How do I reconcile that? Nicolette Larson worked a lot with Neil Young. As I did my research, I find this out, and Lotta Love was a Neil Young composition. Let's put it this way. I will be thankful, eternally thankful, that Nicolette Larson did the song because I can't imagine Neil Young singing that song. And maybe that's something I should give Neil Young credit for, is that he can write a song where he knows he is never going to be able to pull it off, and he gives it to somebody else who can, whether knowingly or not knowingly. So that's it for deaths in our anniversary segment here. Although the next one, in a roundabout way, could still be a little bit morbid. December the 16th of 1993. Now, we talked about this about a month ago, the taping of Nirvana's Unplugged. On this day in 1993, Nirvana's Unplugged aired for the first time on MTV. Of course, it's legendary. It's probably the most legendary Unplugged performance ever on MTV. I'm not going to get into my rant about Kurt Cobain and Nirvana. We've talked about death and suicide in the rock world. I will leave it at the fact that I do love from this performance, and I believe I said this a month ago, their cover of David Bowie's "The Man Who Sold the World" is awesome. Just simply awesome. December the 16th of 1989. Now, this is a follow-up to something we talked about last week. We talked about Billy Joel and how his single, "We Didn't Start the Fire," hit number one on the US singles chart. Well, the album that song came from, Stormfront, hit number one this week in the US. And of course, I miss Billy Joel in terms of his retirement from music and how he doesn't create new music anymore. There's part of me that admires it, and there's part of me that's bitter about it because it just feels like a waste. It just feels like such a waste that a creative person just decides to stop creating and in a way rest on their laurels. And I'm sure at some other time we'll get back into that argument. We've had it here in the past, and we'll have it in the future. Since there's not as much money to be made for these artists in terms of creating new music and putting out albums, what's the point? But to me, I just don't understand how a creative person can just stop creating. Regardless of the reaction from the fans, if you slip in a new song or two during a concert and they don't like it or they call it a bathroom song, you've still got to try to keep creating. Now, Stormfront was, of course, not Billy Joel's last album, but that was kind of when you could see the end coming. We talked about Billy Gibbons earlier here on I Want to Go Back. We talked about learning about new things. This was another little nugget in rock and roll history that I did not know about. Even though this happened after I had just turned 19 years old. I do not remember this. December the 16th of 1984. Dusty Hill of ZZ Top. Of course, now he is gone. He has left us a couple years ago. Dusty Hill accidentally shot himself in the abdomen in his car. Got himself to the hospital and got patched up. Everything was fine. But it's one of those typical rock and roll moments. Where you just go, wow. What, a couple inches, as they say on CSI or one of the other crime shows on TV? Just an inch or two, half an inch, and it would have killed you, Dusty. But I never remembered hearing that back in 1984, on this day, Dusty Hill, bass player for ZZ Top, shot himself. Then finally, to wrap up, I want to go back. December the 16th of 1974. I was 9 years old. So for me, and probably a lot of you out there, the Rolling Stones consist of Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, Charlie Watts, Bill Wyman, and Ron Wood. But those of you who are a little bit older or a little bit more schooled in rock and roll know that before Ron Wood, there was Mick Taylor. Played on a lot of the classic Rolling Stones songs that we all know and love. On this day in 1974, December the 16th, Mick Taylor officially left the Rolling Stones, opening the door for the aforementioned Ron Wood to come in and take over, and for a lot of us, forming the lineup that we all know from the mid-70s on. All right, kids, that is it for I Want to Go Back. Segment 3 is done. Fini. Over. But we're not quite finished yet. As you guys know, one more quick promo coming, and then I will tell you about some new stuff coming up over the next few weeks here to close out 2022 and lead us into 2023. Yes, it is time for Wrap It Up here in just about a minute. Hang out, just a little bit longer with the Maestro, and I'll be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, guys, that's going to about do it for episode 70 of the Fortress of Rock here on December the 16th of 2022. But we've always got to put the cherry on top of the cake. Let you know some of the things that I'm working on, percolating ideas for our reviews for the coming weeks. Now, unfortunately, in terms of concerts, with the weather starting to turn cold, snow, ice here in the north, the Midwest, kind of hard to get out and about for concerts. And of course, as you guys know, the tours kind of wind down a little bit. So probably not going to have much in the way of tour news for you in terms of reviews, in terms of what I see, until February when I get to see Alter Bridge and Mammoth WVH. But in the meantime, next week is our Christmas episode. I've been saving it. I've told you about it. Finally, your review will be next Friday night on episode 71. The great Chris Isaak, his second Christmas album. Everybody knows it's Christmas, with a handful of classics, but a lot of original songs. So that'll be interesting. I'll have that for you definitely next Friday night as we get closer and closer to Christmas. Other new songs that we're going to be looking at. We mentioned Quiet Riot in segment 1 and the remastered release of Rehab with the brand new song, I Can't Hold On. We will definitely give you a review of that here in the next week or two here on the Fortress. Still looking into Vi and Gash, the first two songs off that project back from the early 90s. Busted and In the Wind are the two songs we will review. We talked about the new Steel Panther single, 1987, very much in the spirit of that great Ugly Kid Joe song that I reviewed earlier in the podcast here, Dead Friends Play. Steel Panther's 1987 will be on the slate for next week. And then finally, coming up in the next few weeks, a new song from the Winery Dogs, a band that has kind of flown under the radar, in my humble opinion, over the last decade or so. Of course, the great Eddie Trunk has been a big proponent of them. Their third album, aptly titled 3, is coming out February the 3rd of 2023. Their first single off 3 is Xanadu. So we'll have that for you here in the next few weeks on the Fortress. Of course, those of you who don't know who the Winery Dogs are, Mike Portnoy on drums, formerly of Dream Theater, Billy Sheehan on bass. Of course, you guys know him from Mr. Big and from David Lee Roth's solo band back in the Eat 'em and Smile days. And then leader Richie Kotzen, vocals, guitar. He was the guy most well known for jumping in briefly and taking over as front man for Poison when Bret Michaels stepped briefly away. And if you have not listened to the Winery Dogs, listen to their first two albums. Very good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Highly recommend it. So Xanadu, their first new song in quite a while, on the slate here in the Fortress within the next few weeks. And of course, we've got our 2022 music recap coming. The Maestro's best albums of 2022, best songs of 2022, best concerts of 2022. Those will be coming probably early January. I'm not one of those people like these pretentious movie critic associations who like to give their best of lists in early December before the year's even over. I like to wait until the actual year is over before I start to review the entire year. So, early 2023, you will get my best of music, rock and roll, all of it. 2022 recap coming in about 3 or 4 weeks. So that's going to do it for the Fortress here on the 16th of December. One more episode to go before we hit the holidays. I hope you've got your shopping done, and if you don't, God bless you. I hope that it's not too stressful. I hope you can get free shipping. I hope you can get everything sent out to the people you love who are far away in remote corners of the country or the globe in time for them to get it, to enjoy it. If not, I'm sure they'll understand. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, enjoy your weekend. Listen to some good rock and roll. I will see you in 7 days next Friday. Take care.